Actually, speaking of which.
And we are live.
Hello, everyone.
Hey. All right. So it's supposed to show me comments right there. Sorry, this is my first time using StreamYard, so I'm still figuring it out. So we are here with Niko's Book Reviews and WalkerWrites7 to interview Mr. John Walker on his self-published book, Weavers.
That's me.
I don't have a physical copy. I have an ebook. Otherwise, I'd hold up.
For shame. For shame.
Yeah, just picture that I'm holding it right here, and it's lovely with the art. And oh, I love this copy. Let me tell you what, guys.
It's so light. It's so light and just.
It's so light and just it's like it's not even there. So, do you guys want to kind of talk about yourselves real quick before we get into it?
Well, I can really quick before we get to the main event. So I'm Niko from Niko's Book Reviews. I know probably most watching probably have seen my stuff too. Andrew and I run a Discord, and we have John Walker here, who's also the admin on our Discord and the author of this lovely book. So pretty excited to interview. I tried really hard not to ask too many questions after reading the book to save it for this. So it should go well.
And I'm WalkerWrites7 or John Walker. I have my own booktube channel, so I like to talk about other people's books, and sometimes I talk about my own. You know, don't want to pump it too much, but.
All right. Now, before we get in any further, I have to ask the question that everybody should be asking themselves. And John, at any given moment when starting your booktube channel, did you think of naming your channel Texas Ranger Book Reviews?
Absolutely not.
No?
I'm really against the sorry for our rules watching. I'm really against the Texas cowboy thing. Because I'm not from Texas, I'm from Massachusetts. So I would get Walker Texas Ranger a lot, and I'm not really into cowboys. And then when I went to Italy, they talked, and you said you're from Texas. That's the only thing. I'm sure it's not even just Italy. I'm sure it's almost every other country. You say you're from Texas, and they're like, cowboy. And I'm like, no.
That's really great. So, if I said I was from Iowa, they'd be like, I don't know what that is, really. So,
we got Noah in the house. All right, so
hello.
I'm thinking we'll talk about the book a little bit. We'll talk about some inspirations. We'll talk about some characters and some overall story. We'll try and keep it mostly spoiler free. But I mean, obviously, we'll talk about a couple scenes that we really loved. Niko and I were talking backstage, and we've got a little bit of crossover, so we'll try and avoid that. John, if you're okay with it, we'll kind of alternate questions at you. I know you've seen most of my list. I kind of sent them ahead to you just to see if there was anything you wanted me to omit or add. And then at the end, we may, if we've got enough people watching, we may open it up to questions from the chat, or we could just sit there and kind of talk. We'll have to see what happens. But I am going to let Niko take the first question.
Can I actually start with something else real quick, though?
Yeah, you can. Absolutely.
Before we begin, I know there's not a ton of people watching, but if anyone's actually on Discord, on our Wizardly Duo Discord, first off, if you're not, go join it, because I just opened the book exchange event.
Oh, yeah.
So if you guys don't know, it's been on there for a while, it's coming soon, so I just opened it. It's no longer private. It has a name. So on Wizardly Duo Discord, we are doing a book exchange or like a Secret Santa kind of thing. So if you guys want to sign up, you'll be getting a book and giving a book. So really excited. So go check that out after the stream or during it. Multitask.
Yeah, what happens?
It's fair. Well, I suppose the first thing to probably ask is, the old, can you tell us a little bit about the book? Obviously, both of us have read the book and so are familiar, but for anybody watching here, it looks like we are picking up some viewers here. So for anybody watching, can you give us just kind of a synopsis of the book and just kind of give us a little info on it?
Absolutely. So believe it or not, that's actually really hard to do. I know I researched a lot into how to create a synopsis for the book. But essentially, my synopsis is just that it is set in our world, basically around like 2010 to about 2015. But 70 years before that, around the time that the World War II bomb went off, it actually had a different effect than what we know. And the bombing actually caused people to be able to wield the elements. They're called weavers. The magic system is that you kind of use your own soul or essence to sort of like connect with the elements, and you're usually able to wield fire, water, earth, and air. And like I said, that's how the whole story, or that's how the little magic system starts. But again, we pick up in around 2010 or so, where we follow 3 characters who are all weavers, and but it actually does take them on a journey to essentially, like, there's usually a lot of, it's, even though it sounds kind of like magical with like the elements, there's a lot of real issues where essentially one of the main characters is dealing with the loss of his sister, who ends up kind of coming back and maybe being a bigger part of like the overall plot. There is like an event about halfway through where it sort of like triggers everything. So essentially it's like 3 characters who are dealing with a lot of like social expectations, familial issues, all while wielding the elements.
Yeah, I think that was a good summary there. I know it is hard to summarize books, so anytime I try to tell somebody what a book is about, it's always really hard for me in general. So I imagine that would be a struggle with trying to tell people about your own book. Like, it's hard to summarize sometimes.
I think the biggest thing was always trying to keep it a mystery. You're always just like, well, how much do you want to reveal? I'm just like, because I think you kind of want to keep it vague, but not so vague to where you're like, what is this book about?
It's definitely a fine line. So I'm usually somebody, I like to go on books pretty blind. So I definitely can appreciate that. Yeah, because if you for example look at like the synopsis for like some of the farcier books where it spoils major plot points for other books and stuff, it's just like, that's too much information. Like, let's keep it a little bit more vague than that. So,
well, I wanted to know kind of what kind of made you want to create the Weaver's World? What made you want to write a book? I mean, that's a very broad question, but what was the moment that the idea popped in your head and you had to get it out on the page?
I think it was around the point when I started joining BookTube and I realized how, I mean, I've always been wanting to create. I've always created stories in my head, and I've rarely written them down. And I think it was around when I started BookTube and I realized how accessible it was to actually create a book. I think I always held myself back towards, I just thought that it was so unattainable. I'm like, there's no way like I could write a book. It wasn't that I initially thought like no one would enjoy my stories, although that's always a fear. But I realized that like I could actually write it. Like nowadays with our technology and us being able to publish it, I was like, I can actually put my words from my head into a book and see it on paper. So I think it was just me realizing that I could do it. It's accessible and possible.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, self-publishing has just changed the game. It's absolutely changed the game. And, it was published in a genre that I typically don't read. I have maybe read a handful of YA books, and yours happens to just be one of them. And I actually think yours is kind of, if there was a middle step between YA and adult fantasy, I think it would slot in better right in there.
Yeah, that was something I really struggled with. First off, even though I'm a booktuber, I'm really bad with genres. Like I hate trying to define genres. So in general, I'm kind of like, is it like suburban fantasy, or like it's really hard for me to decide like what my book is. Sometimes I almost feel like maybe somebody else should decide what my book is because I'm not really sure. I just wrote the story, but I think I originally thought it was supposed to be like new adult. But one of the editors who wasn't actually, I ended up going with her, but I initially gave her everything for it. And I said like, oh, it's kind of like a new adult. She actually suggested me not to do that because in the publishing world, I guess, like new adult isn't a thing, or it's like not really looked down on. So it's like, I always kind of thought that's what I was going to go with, is new adult. So it's not YA, it's not adult or fantasy or anything like that. But she's just like, no, don't use that because I don't think it's like a good term right now in the grand scheme of things. So it kind of makes sense. Exactly what you were thinking. That's how I thought about it. But
well, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I don't think I've ever heard of new adult. So That I didn't realize that was a genre at all, but there's always lots to talk with genres. So I was going to ask this a little bit later, but I feel like this was the perfect segue. So talking about kind of self-publishing and the fact that it did make it a lot more accessible and easy for you to actually write and publish your book. What were some of the like the nicest or like the most freeing things with self-publishing versus some of like the biggest challenges with self-publishing?
I definitely feel like I liked how. Well, the challenging thing was definitely, I think, editing. It's like I feel like a lot of that's usually done for yourself. It's like finding. It's not only just like finding an editor, but finding the right kind of editor, not paying too much, knowing like what a good price is. But the fun stuff is always just like again, you're completely in control. So like I knew I was able to like get my own kind of artwork. I was able to actually format it myself. So although like yeah, you have to actually go out and do it yourself, and you have to like really learn a lot of things. It was really fun to know I had full control, and like what I wanted to see on page was what I was going to get.
Yeah, it's really, which you're an amazing artist. So again, I think Patrick wouldn't forgive me if I didn't bring it up. And I don't think he's here yet. He said he was going to maybe jump in a little later. But I definitely think you have the ability and the skill to do the cover art for your next book.
100%.
Well, my next book, the cover art's actually already done. So even for the third one, I don't know. I mean, I definitely appreciate it. I'm really flattered by it. I honestly don't think I could. One, mostly because I use a lot of references when I actually do my art, and the people that I get, they can create new poses and new formatting and stuff like that. I'm really limited into how, like, into what my characters are going to look like, because I have to find references to kind of fit that. So like obviously when I'm working with an artist, they're like, oh, you don't like this? Let me just make them do like something completely else. And so I definitely am very flattered, but I also think that I could find better.
Epic wants to know if eventually we can see a preview of the art.
I actually would like to show it, but I don't think you can share.
Maybe just do it in Discord at some point. I don't know enough about StreamYard in order to do that here yet.
So on kind of the note of the art and working with the artist, like how closely did you work with them? Do you feel like the character art really was your vision, or did anything change through that kind of process?
Sorry, first off, I can share the image. I see how.
How does that work?
Oh, let's see if it works. A little bit of a preview here.
So yeah, I was kind of surprised, but yes, I actually do have. This is a title and cover reveal for my sequel.
Ooh, that's doubly exciting.
Let me see. Now ask your question again real quick. I'm going to try to say it while I'm looking for it.
Yeah, no problem. So with you talked about kind of working with the artist and how you worked with somebody who was able to like do some different things and like work with you to make sure that it turned out the way you wanted. So I know you've said when we've chatted before that you do really like the art for it. Did the characters kind of come to life and really match your vision, or were there any things that changed or that were different with having somebody actually create the visual representations of them?
It honestly is, and we maybe get into this later, but I grew to really care a lot about my characters. That when you first sort of get it, you're nervous almost the entire time. So it's like, obviously they're doing a bunch of rough sketches, so I'm just like, I see where you're going with this. I have to trust that it's going to look better. So you're like, yeah, this looks good, this looks good. I'm always really nervous the whole time. But it's like when you get to the end, and the artist that I worked with, he just kind of like, he predicted things like I didn't kind of know like I wanted, or it's like when he did it, I was like, yes, that's perfect. So it's like, it actually like literally gives me the goosebumps when he sends me the final image, because I can't believe like these are my characters like in like drawn form. And so it's not something that I can do because I need like a reference. And so it's like, I'm more like just finding something that I've already seen, whereas like he literally is creating it from my literal vision. And so yeah, it was incredible. Actually, it's really fun, and it's grueling to wait. It's a grueling process waiting for him to give me updates, especially the second one. The second one, he took a lot longer, and I was just like, where is it? Where is it?
I bet that would be hard, yeah. It sounds like you had a really great experience though working with that artist, so that's really good. Probably another perk with the self-publishing, having complete creative control over that too. So
Absolutely. So yeah, I actually do have it ready. Do we want to show it now or wait till like the end? We wait till like
Well,
the
I
end.
mean, let's go ahead and show it now. Why not?
I'm excited to see it. I was hoping you'd say that, Andrew, because I'm like, I could see waiting, but I'm like, oh, now I'm curious.
There it is.
Ooh.
Ooh, War Weavers.
I was gonna say I already like the name, and that is really cool.
All right. Well, that is very, very cool.
You heard it here first, people. That's a cover reveal, a title reveal.
Yep. That's the most
All right.
cool.
Coming
So,
to
do we want to talk any more about the self-publishing format and process, or do we want to move straight into kind of the book and its influence and things of that nature? Because we are starting to get questions on the influences of the writing.
It's up to you guys. You lead. I will follow.
All right. Well, I say we move into inspiration territory. Nico, do you have any questions for this?
I do. So I want to start with the one that I actually forgot to ask when you were talking before. But I know that you're a big fan of Avatar, and this also uses kind of elemental magic. Was that like partially inspired from Avatar, or was that more kind of just coincidental? Like that was kind of always what you thought anyway?
I mean, definitely wasn't a coincidence at all. I'm heavily inspired not just by the elemental magic, but the heart that goes into Avatar: The Last Airbender. I feel like they didn't just have I think the main inspiration definitely was the martial arts. I really love the idea of not just I think honestly, Avatar: The Last Airbender, my book, ruined almost every other like elemental system. Like if you're just like throwing fireballs, just to throw a fireball, it kind of like it's like eh. But like I really like the martial arts behind it. I like the flow and the idea of like using your element mixed in with martial arts. So that was definitely heavily inspired by it. Probably the biggest inspiration. And then I just knew I wanted to make. I mean, that's kind of given with anything, but I knew I wanted to make characters that were beyond just the magic system. So I think, like I said, yeah, I think martial arts is definitely the main inspiration for Avatar: The Last Airbender. But yeah, clearly I loved it. And almost any character that they create is like an inspiration for future characters.
So I can definitely see that 100%. So I was pretty sure that was the case, but yeah, it's an interesting taking a look at taking inspiration from that show, which is a very different setting, and then adapting it into kind of a whole new world.
Yeah, I want to pick up that thread though when you're talking about the martial arts, because some of the fight scenes that you have after the first time skip are very, very well written. What kind of inspired did you pull from Avatar, or like how did you craft those scenes and in the way that they are viewing the weaving and then interacting with it and then coming up, like how Vin finds flaws or weaknesses that he can exploit, things of this nature, and it's just really well done. So I just kind of want to know how you went about crafting these.
I just kind of feel like I think I always knew when I kind of like imagine scenes a lot, because usually I imagine scenes before I ever write them. Like when I listen to music, I'm always imagining like a fight scene or something like that. So that's kind of the easy part, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't just like I'm throwing a fist here and like I'm kicking here, like I'm like throwing fireballs. And I also think the inherent magic system to where they're mixing their like internal essence with like elemental, I feel like there had to be a deeper connection than, like I said, I want the elemental system to mean more than just like, oh, I can control fire and throw it. So I think that once I opened myself up to like a deeper magic system, I wanted to play with like the connection and like how strong it would be, because you have to like insert a certain amount of your energy into it, or you have to have a certain sort of connection. And so I think once I kind of like opened myself up to that, as I thought of fight scenes, I was able to kind of do something more creative and think about like how strong the differences in strength is. Like you said, that very first fight scene, for those who don't know, it's essentially just like a warm-up or just to kind of show off the magic system, and it shows somebody who's really strong, essentially like a hammer versus scalpel is like, I think exactly how I described the very first fight. So it's like I wanted to show two strong people but a different way to kind of like use that magic system. So it seemed more interesting.
Yeah. The way the magic system works definitely was delved into a lot, because I remember I actually read into it even further than you had intended, because I asked you some questions. I'm like, am I reading too much into this, or like, is this going to be a future plot? And I had taken it even too far, but it was really, I really enjoyed those scenes and kind of looking into them, and the way it all worked with the magic. Yeah, I agree, was really fun. Oh, so I suppose it's me now.
It is you.
I got distracted by the last question, and I forgot. I'm like, did I ask that question, Andrew? But so I do want to touch a bit on the characters, because that was for me my favorite thing about this. It was the characters. There were a lot of things, but that really, for me, really shined through as the focus. And like I had commented when we've chatted about this, it's such a character-driven story, and it avoids doing a lot of the annoying things and the kind of like fake relationships, or these people feel this way, just believe it, I'm not going to show you why. And instead, the relationship seems super organic, and friendship was such an important theme with reading through too. So at the end, I know you noted too, in kind of the note, that there were some people in your real life that were the basis for kind of some of the friendships or some of the characters. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or maybe an example of somebody who maybe makes an appearance in spirit in your book?
Yeah, I feel like I've always been someone who doesn't easily forget friends. I'm definitely one of those people where it's like, well, honestly, in general, my group of friends from late high school, and we all sort of became friends, is no matter how long apart, no matter how much time we spend apart from each other, like when we get back together, it feels like it's just like the same old stuff. Like we didn't really miss a beat or anything. So I feel like I've always had this sort of like connection. And my idea of friends is that time doesn't really matter, that you'll always kind of like feel really strongly connected to them. So I feel like I've always, even though I don't talk to a lot of people, I always like remember them, like how what they taught me, like really fondly. So there's a lot of like inspiration from friends that I have, like just like Matt, one of the main characters. My friend Jose, he's actually Hispanic, and a lot of the smaller little details from his family I definitely use. Like there's this like random quirk of like how his mom always goes like shopping, and whenever like they'll come home and they'll just like have different furniture or something like that. And I remember, going to his house and seeing that exact same thing. Like I'd go there one day and he'd have some furniture, and I'd come back the next and there'd be like other furniture. And I thought it'd be really fun just kind of bring that in. So yeah, I feel like I just kind of remembered my friends and like how like I kind of acted with them, and sort of just used that in the book.
That's really funny that the furniture thing was from a real story, because I would not have guessed that. I read
Me
that and
either.
I'm like, that's kind of strange. It did seem like I was wondering where you came up with that and why. So I'm glad that that's the example that you picked, because as you were saying, like that does make a lot more sense than him just being like, I'm going to write someone who changes their furniture. So knowing that there's a real life parallel, that's really fun.
Yeah, I definitely tried to find a bunch of, or not a bunch of, but I definitely tried to make sure they were not so one note. There are very small scenes, but like just with like the fact that Matt and Amber are both artists, but like their whole life isn't around it. I wanted to make sure that these people feel like they had other hobbies. Again, that's where a lot of times where my friends were helpful, because I just think about like what were the small things I remember from my friends that are not their whole personality, but are just like a part of life. So I wanted to make sure that it seemed like they had a whole life before, in a life outside of the main story, other than like what we're reading.
So I kind of want to pick up this thread, since we're having a lot of good segues here, and I really wanted to start talking about the characters and their relationships. And since you've got so much emotion and memory tied up into this, we've got Vin, we've got Matt, we've got Amber, we've got Tanya, which I cannot hear the name Tanya without SNL's Lifetime game show sketch coming into my brain. It's ruined the name for me, but nevertheless, there it is. And then we've got Maggie. And these are kind of all of the main characters that we've got. And the way they interact is super interesting. Specifically, we've got Matt and Vin, who are best friends. Then we've kind of got the new addition, Amber. as a possible love interest. And then we've got the aforementioned sister and her friend who has gone missing, which is Tanya and Maggie. You see, I even pronounce Tanya differently now. I got to put the pale hater spin on it. And I just really want to know kind of how you crafted these relationships and how you chose for them to interact.
Oh, that's a rough one. I think it's hard just because it's that I'm trying to answer this right away because I think it might come up later, but a lot of my writing process or thought process is, like I said, I'm usually just listening to music and I'm always imagining new scenes or just different events. Hey, Book Binge, thanks for coming. So I always feel like the characters were always there. They were always just blank slate. Like, yes, here's like an air weaver. He's got a friend. Honestly, I think a lot of my closest friends have been Hispanic, so I think it just automatically was just like that's just got to be like the best friend. I've had like so many like really close relationships with Hispanic friends. My best friend's Hispanic, so it's just like it was all really surface level when I was first thinking about it, and I guess kind of like making them deeper was definitely like a challenge. I knew that I wanted to. I think it was more like I had to start with wanting to make sure there were strong enough relationships, like relationships that maybe are sometimes rare or that I kind of want to see more of. So I knew I wanted to have like a really strong male friendship. That's why I wanted to make sure I put a lot of time into having Vin and Matt be really good friends, which was honestly really easy because I said I'm a male and I've had a lot of friends growing up. So it was really easy for me to imagine like a strong male friendship. And then I knew I wanted to see more sibling dynamics. I like when stories have really strong sibling dynamics. So I wanted to show a really good example of that. And then maybe one that didn't seem like, because Vin also has a sibling and she has a really small part, but I wanted to make sure that there was a variety of siblings there. So I guess I kind of just found relationships that I hadn't seen a lot of, or if I have, I wanted to see more of and kind of just put them like in my story.
Yeah, I remember specifically just as I was reading through, because you don't see a lot of books that have male friendship that much, and you don't see a lot of books that have even like male-female friendship unless it's immediately because this is specifically a love interest. And so I really liked how organic and real the relationships felt, and with like the siblings, with the parents, just how everybody interacted. It didn't seem like it's just, oh, this is the same wooden thing you might see in like a cliche version of something. Everything felt very organic. And so yeah, it was really nice to see those different kinds of relationships and not just have a character like fall hopelessly in love and then that's the whole focus from now on. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to touch base on that even more because I was messaging John the entire time I was reading the book. Some of it is NSFW, but
not my book, but his thoughts are a little NSFW. Just to be clear.
Yeah, not the book, me. I was just being a bit of a child. Surprise. But I remember specifically commenting on Vin and I'm sorry, I forget the sister's name, but their relation. Say what?
Juliet.
So Vin and Julia, the way they interact immediately took me back to my childhood and my interactions with my sister. It felt so genuine. I have never really experienced, like, don't get me wrong, other authors can write really great characters, but that specific relationship felt so organic and unique, like Nico said, that it immediately took me there. I could tell that they were siblings. And then also the introduction, excuse me, if I can speak, of a female friend. Instead of insta love, you get, I believe in insta attraction, but I don't believe in insta love. If that makes sense.
No,
first comes attraction, then comes love. Love isn't an emotion. Love is a commitment and work to me. And so they have an instant attraction, but it is not a immediate like, ugh, like time stopped and all they could see was each other's eyes and their souls. No, it was none of that. It very much, it felt good and great, and I really, really enjoyed that.
Like I'll just get this out of the way now. Like whenever, like people who say when you feel like that, when you guys have that kind of reaction to my characters, which is literally like I felt like was my strong suit. That's what I want. It's really nice to hear that, honestly, because when I was first editing, usually your editor will be like, well, what do you want to see? They'll ask you, like a good editor asks, like, well, what do you want to come out of your book? Which I think you and Epic actually touched on that with one of when you did that video with that professor. And it really struck too, is like when you're not doing traditionally published, your editor wants to make sure that what your vision is, that they help you find the best version of your oh. But an editor is supposed to make sure that they find your best vision for what you're looking for, and like that's what I tell every single one of my editors when I'm sort of like asking if they're going to edit my book. Is they're like, well, what do you want to see out of this? And I was like, I want my characters to matter, to mean something, and to actually like impact people. Like when they read it, I want them to come away saying they really enjoyed the characters. So it's honestly, it's like seriously the best compliment for like you to feel so passionately about that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's so much. Like I said, that was for me really my favorite part. It's just like I felt like I was reading about real people, despite the fact that they have like magical abilities and whatnot. It's just you don't get that a lot where authors tend to focus, especially. And granted, this is a shorter story, and there's not a huge cast of characters, so it does give you more opportunity to really look. But kind of like you mentioned, just the little touches. A lot of authors kind of ignore the little touches, I feel like sometimes. John Quinn, whom I really enjoy, but it's just like I love John Quinn too. I'm more joking there because he tends to just like he tends to kind of like, we're gonna ignore everything that's not immediately relevant to the plot. But this book kind of like, it did have some like time jumps, and most of it felt like it was just the scenes where we saw the characters interacting. And I like at points, I just like was thinking in my head that like you like hired actors or something, like, all right, I'm going to put you in a scene and you just interact normally, and that's what I'm going to write. It felt like it was happening right in front of you. So that's very enjoyable.
Thank you.
So I've got so Epic asked a question earlier, and I've kind of got one that fits. So I kind of want to, it kind of fits, but it doesn't to what we're currently at. But basically he asked, who are some writers who inspired you? And my question, which kind of goes immediately parallel with it, was, did you read any books to prepare to write Weavers?
I kind of wish I had a really inspirational answer for this, but I really don't. The main one that I see would inspire me, or that helped me craft a story, was Brandon Sanderson. When I read Mistborn, the whole trilogy, it was the first time it ever showed me how awesome cookie crumbs could be. And obviously some of the things that you guys have read, I mean, the trilogy isn't done yet, so you can't get the full spot of it. But I love the idea of finding really subtle ways to foreshadow or to start things, and then like for them to pay off like a little bit later. So that's the main one that I knew for sure I had in mind when I was writing certain scenes, where I was like, okay, I know I want to put this here so that this is really interesting here and here.
I mean, Sanderson's never a bad answer in my book, so
I wish I had a better. It's like I wish I had a better answer for people, but like I can't think of someone where I was just like, oh yeah, I definitely read that, and I definitely didn't do any research. I don't know. I think that I don't even know if even like reading really helped me write it. I think more TV shows or movies where you have like really emotional moments, like Lord of the Rings or something. When just the way you see those characters interact, and the way that like Aragorn is so versatile, or he's like so humble. He's this really like strong man's man. He's like a hunter and he's a tracker. Then he has like really these soft emotional moments with like oh my god, I almost said Eowyn. That's not who I was thinking. Arwen. And then at the end,
they're very similar names.
Yeah, and at the end when he's so humble, when he says, oh my god, that part at the end where he bows to the hobbits instead of them bowing to him. It's just, I think seeing the emotion in movies really made me know that I want like nuanced characters who can be emotional as well. So maybe not reading too much, but I think definitely a lot of those really strong character-centric stories with really great actors helped a lot.
It's interesting. I wouldn't have really thought about that much, but that does make a whole lot of sense with just kind of seeing people actually, acting and doing. Because you could always read and kind of imagine things, but like taking performances from stuff like that actually makes a lot of sense when you put it like that. But that wasn't something I'd really thought a whole lot about. So it's a really interesting take.
Yeah, I never expected that answer. You completely subverted my expectation there.
There you go.
Hey, it's not a bad thing. But
Yeah.
speaking of subversion, because that could not have been any more perfect for my next question, one of the things that I brought up too, and so I already know part of the answer of this, but it was something I definitely wanted to bring up and have you talk about too. Something that I really enjoyed was how many tropes were subverted or just kind of not done in the same way that you would typically get, especially in a book that reads a little bit younger. There were a lot of things in this book that could have very much been tropes, but weren't. Like the fact that it's high schoolers, but it's not really a school setting, so to speak. A lot of that was just kind of, what a high school's like. High school happened, and some things like that too, where it's just you used people's existing knowledge, it seemed to me, of tropes to make it so that you didn't have to write something tropey and just kind of use that knowledge. And so I was curious how much of that was intentional, especially since I know you do read a lot of YA, and so I'm sure you've come across a lot of tropes like that. Was that something you specifically set out to avoid, and just kind of like, what was your thought process there?
Absolutely, for sure. I'm very critical and opinionated about things that annoy me and like communication tropes and
None of us are like that.
yeah, and first love, like that really cheesy, like I'm gonna like lose everything for you. So yeah, like as a reader, it was definitely really easy for me to be like, I don't want to write this stuff into it because I don't like it. I do like that you actually thought there was a lot of subversion in there or missing tropes. I definitely know that school one is one we've talked about, and that's the main one I can think of. If you guys can think any more, I'd love to kind of elaborate on it. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I literally had a beta reader who told me, they were like, hey, why do we skip right to them being like seniors? Like we didn't get to see them in school or anything like that. And I was like, because that sounds really boring and I don't really want to write that. And I was like, no, but not only that, I didn't want to discuss them learning, but I thought there might be more creative ways to do it. So it's like, even though you may have missed their classes throughout the book, Vin, who's like our main character, he's really powerful, because the society made him be so. So for those who don't know, Vin is an air weaver, and in their society, air weavers are really important because they're the most useful to certain things. Like there's a lot of that, it goes a lot into stuff about like natural disaster relief. So there's like hurricanes, there's like terror situations, like all the natural disasters. Air weavers are like the most important. They could be used very well in many scenarios. And so whenever they're first I almost said reaping. That's not a reaping. They take an attunement ceremony where you figure out in your freshman year what you are. And so when Vin finds out he's an air weaver, you kind of have a time skip from there. And like you realize that because of this, because all this pressure and expectations they have on him, he's had to grow up and become very skilled. And there's also a little bit more of a spiritual stuff along the way. There is some spiritual reasons behind why he's more powerful with weaving than other people. But essentially, yeah, he's sort of trained, but you don't see any of it. But his friend Matt, I feel like Vin has to explain a lot of things to Matt and show Matt how to be a better weaver. So it's like I found a way to get character interaction between Vin and Matt and show Matt progressing and explain the magic system. I prefer doing all of that instead of just putting them in classes from freshman year to senior year, like going to school. I feel like there's a way to integrate all of that really boring, repetitive stuff into the actual story and like character development and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was definitely, I appreciated not having to read that, because when I start reading and I'm like, oh God, an attunement, I'm like, oh God, high school. And I'm like, is this going to be every other YA book? And I'm like, oh no, it completely isn't. We're not doing any of that or spending a ton of time there. So I was really happy to kind of bypass that. And well, kind of like you said, you did, I feel like, find other ways to show what was happening. Like there were mentions throughout of the kind of classes that they took based on what element they were a weaver for. So like we still got the general idea, and I feel like it was accomplished very succinctly so that we could focus more on the much more interesting stuff, like, you know, the characters and the action and so forth. So
I'm not convinced John is a mind reader because he just answered the question I was about to ask.
it was
So I'm
such a
gonna
good
have to-
segue. We didn't even have to segue.
Yeah, I was going to straight segue into it, and then he just took the segue without any prompting and made me feel like a bad moderator.
What was the question? Maybe I can elaborate on it. You know, what did I predict?
Oh no, you answered the entire question.
Oh.
So yeah, let me. I'm like looking down at my notes trying to find something else. So I'm gonna give it back to Nico.
Okay.
So I can you preemptively answer your next question, right?
Yeah, it was basically something to do with Vin and Amber's extra power, which basically Amber comes across it through tragedy, and then Vin gets it through just a small nugget of wisdom from somebody has a different culture than he does, and then from there he takes that small nugget or that small seed and grows like a tree out of it. So, but that was kind of basically the whole thing, and then you just blew past the question and elaborated even further.
It just so happens that since you mentioned culture, Andrew, that does segue really nicely into another question that I had. So I'm glad you told us. So it still worked out. Because that was something I wanted to bring up, and you talked a little bit about too, with the different characters, and like with Matt, who's Latino, and who you kind of based off some friends that you had had. The book does include multiple different cultures. We have Vin, who he has Italian heritage, Matt, who has Latino heritage, and then Amber, who has like Native American heritage. And I don't want to get into too many details because they each kind of, as you said in the synopsis, have their own kind of family issues, some of it relating to heritage, certainly. But was that like a very conscious choice to be inclusive with different cultures, or was that just kind of organically how the story came about?
I think it was a little bit of both. I definitely can't say like I always think in like many colors, or like, oh yeah, obviously it was so natural for me to do all this stuff. But I did make a conscious effort to know that I did want to have diverse people, not just to check boxes, but because I feel like there's a lot of importance into other cultures. Like for instance, I think it was so long ago I don't quite remember, but when I was first learning about or I was first kind of developing the characters, I kind of asked Matt, or I asked my friend who's Hispanic, who like, hey, it's not really a spoiler, but for those who don't know, Matt and Magdalena are siblings, and at the very beginning, the prologue, Magdalena runs away because she figures out that she is something very scary, and there's to herself, and there's a lot of I don't know if illusion is the right word. There's a lot of comparisons to that in real life with mental health. Possibly being LGBT. So there's a lot of real world examples of this, but she mainly did it because of her powers in the story. And so I asked, what would happen in your family if like your sibling ran away, if your sibling like dishonored you or dishonored your family? And so my family is actually a really real answer. I'm not saying all Hispanics do this, but so that was actually a real answer. They said that they would probably act like this person never existed and keep a very small like shrine to them, or very small memorial for their child, but essentially they would act like they just didn't exist. And I'm actually getting emotional. This is really weird. So yeah, so that was really weird. So that was really real. I actually did ask, what would happen in your family if they came out as LGBT or they ran away or something like that. So that was really real. And then I knew with Amber, or I knew with Native Americans in general, there's not a lot on them. We tend, I feel like, to basically, and I think I brought this up, but Native American culture is it's being swept under the rug. Like not a lot of people are paying attention to it. I think that we're trying to basically forget them, probably because of how horrible they were treated and what happened to them. So I think it was really important to try to like remember them and like keep their culture alive. But I feel like if anyone knows like anything about the American or Native American culture, is that they're very spiritual and very close to like nature and stuff like that. And I knew I wanted a character who represented something like that in my book. So it was kind of just really easy to want to use a Native American background and research their culture when I'm writing a story about people being with nature and connecting with the elements. So it was a conscious decision to make a diverse cast, and then I consciously wanted to make sure I had someone who represented something different and something unique with the elements.
Yeah, I think it definitely fit really, really well because kind of, once again, without going into details, Amber's specific relationships with her family and kind of her viewpoint on the world, I think added quite a lot to the story and to the magic system in a really good way. So nobody ever felt like, oh, here's the token, this type of person or anything with it, which I also thought was well done. So that's thanks for elaborating on that. Interesting to hear.
So this actually gives me now you can ixnay the question if you want, since you said you were starting to get emotional. But during the reading of the book, the three main characters, I thought we were going to enter into what was essentially a love triangle. Now keep in mind I was a little bit subverted here. I thought that because I watch a lot of your content and I know some of your tastes in books, I thought we were heading towards an Eminem romance in this book, only to realize, but it was like more of like, it felt more one-sided than the other. And, there was a little bit of jealousy here and a little bit of that over here. And they were trying to come together. And it was just this big stew pot. Did you ever consider making it an Eminem romance?
What if this would spoil the future? No, I'm just kidding. For sure. I mean, Matt is definitely, it's mostly hinted at. I mostly didn't have time or didn't really want to go into too much extra stuff, but Matt is an LGBT character. He is bi. And I think there is some mentions of that. He talks about having past girlfriends. He talks about like flirting with the guy, and we may see that in the future. And Vin is definitely, for those who don't know, like Vin is probably most likely, and this actually has a lot to do with his powers and kind of a point of the plot, which I don't want to go into it too much, but Vin is most likely pansexual, which means that you kind of love anybody or everyone, no matter their gender. You kind of just love them like as a person. And I think Vin is definitely developing into that, which is perfectly fine. It actually is a very common thing for you to kind of grow up and discover new things and discover you may not be liking just this type of person. So I think the groundwork is definitely there. I understand that you can definitely see that, and I don't fault you for like thinking that. I think one of the beta readers actually did say that they wanted Vin and Matt to get together, which I'm not even mad about. I think it's actually really sweet that you can see that kind of relationship in two guys, because I know that is not very common. But no, I knew I definitely didn't want to. I wanted to have a very healthy relationship, and I don't think love triangles is healthy. I think it's also, I wanted to show that you can be friends with someone, even if you maybe like them more than that, you can still have a healthy relationship without it. Because most likely, if you know their history, Matt maybe have some kind of like romantic feelings for him, but they just have a really strong connection. You can have a strong connection without it necessarily being romantic, which is also what I set up with Amber and Vin. It's like they have a connection before it kind of gets like romantic. So there's definitely some like love triangle things, but it's also like it's a complete triangle. Like Amber and Matt are also really good together, not romantically, but like they also have a connection. So
I like their banter.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that got across to you. I had to make sure she fits in with the group. So yeah, I definitely won't fault you for thinking that. It's definitely there, but I also think in general that kind of speaks to just how strong the relationship is. I wanted their relationships to feel strong enough to where, I mean, because love is a very deep connection. You just don't have to go in a sexual manner with it or anything like that. So,
well, you already know who I'm shipping. I need my mountain scene.
Andrew wants a sexual scene in the mountain.
We're getting to those not safe for work type comments from Andrew.
I kept it vague. He outed me.
Sex isn't not safe for work. You can talk about without going into graphic detail.
Oh man,
Balls in your court, Nico.
I will say, reading through, because there were the really strong friendships. There were a couple of times where I questioned. I'm like, is that where this is going? And then there were a couple of times with the main love interest. I'm like, are they not going to, just because I felt like that was nice. It really was more so about friendship and about their relationships with each other, and kind of like everything else felt a little bit secondary, which I thought was a nice way to look at it. It wasn't just like, I'm only interested in you for whatever reason. There was kind of, it felt more real, and it was kind of slow moving at times. And so it definitely makes you kind of wonder what's going to be happening with the different relationships.
It was definitely intentional for sure. I definitely want people to come away with that. I would rather people say that's a really strong connection or really strong friendship or bond between the characters than being like, oh, that was a really good romance. So like, that's secondary.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge romance fan, so that was also another thing that kind of just worked for me. And like I said, this book could have easily been something that I would not have liked at all. There were a lot of elements that if they would have been done very like differently,
Red flag. Where's the red flag you're waving?
Yeah, like I told you, I was straight up, and I'll admit it live. I was really worried to read this because I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. And every it was like ticking off the boxes. I'm like, oh, the thing I was worried about was actually done completely differently and really well. And so there were a lot of things that I expected, and pretty much every time I was reading and I expected to see something just based on past reading experience, I'm like, oh no, and we're not doing that. And it worked really well for me. So
that's awesome. Again, that's a huge compliment. Thank you.
Oh, I meant it as 100%. Yeah. So.
Oh yeah, no, it was. I was very. It was weird. I got a weird bug up my shorts, and then just like bought it and read it instantly. I think we were talking one day, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna buy your book and read it. Whatever. I just shoved it straight in the TBR, or up my TBR, as Epic would say.
I'm generally surprised. I think you're my friend Isaac, who recently joined our Discord. He was definitely one of the first people that read it. But besides that, I haven't had too many people read it, and you two are definitely. And when I first started talking to people a lot, since Megan shouted us all out, and we all started getting big and talking, I think I asked a couple of people or suggested it to a couple of people. You were honestly the last two I assumed would pick it up just based on the reading thing. Like I wouldn't have even like told Nico, yeah, you should read my book because of exactly what you said. So I think that's awesome that like what I assumed you guys wouldn't like, you ended up liking. That makes me know that my book is a lot more accessible to a lot more like audiences than I would have assumed.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'll let you go. Go ahead.
Other than the standard grammatical errors, it was almost a 4 out of 5 for me. And a 4 out of 5 for me is something that I would definitely pick up again later down the road. I would definitely pick up a version 2 down the road if we get a reprint on some.
When we get a reprint, I'll sign it and send it to you as a thank you.
Oh, yes. Don't send it to Nico though; he doesn't deserve it.
Well, so far Nico's the only one that sent me in corrections, so.
Excuse me, I believe I sent you your corrections while I was reading it.
Yeah, but you want me to go through our whole history of you talking about NSFW, looking for your corrections?
I don't need you calling me out live.
Oh, man. But anyway,
said,
just to plug a little.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I'll be quick. I figure so. I mean, part of this, of course, is to plug the book, with the author interview. But we've talked a lot, and I've seen some people in the chat too talking about it. But really, this is for me and Andrew, this is not a book that's really something like either one of us would have probably normally picked up organically. And both of us tend to read different stuff. I read like mostly like epic fantasy and different stuff, and yeah, you can see his books a little more clearly than mine. And so
Oh, I thought he was like
this
doing
was
like curly cues. I was like, what is Andrew doing?
Just
yes.
Nico knew what I was doing. We're the same person.
Yeah. And so it's just it did a lot of good things. And so it does read a little bit more YA, but it's just well written. It's very, very character driven, and still has an interesting plot and just avoids a lot of the stuff that I personally have associated with a lot of YA. And so I think really this is a book that it's not a huge read either. I got through it pretty quickly, and it's definitely something I think a lot of people would enjoy. So definitely recommend that you check out Weavers. I'll cover my face with it. I'm excited. I'm going to definitely read the second one too, especially after seeing the cover. I like cover 2 more than this one. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
So that was really cool.
No, I'm in agreement.
Yeah, cover 2 looks beautiful.
So as we're kind of starting to wind down a little bit, I wanted to touch a couple more things and then kind of move into maybe just a brief spoiler section and kind of gush about our favorite scenes. I've got a couple that I'd like to talk about. But in terms of writing Weavers, what did you do in order to overcome any sort of writer's block or anything of that nature?
Oh, well, thank you for that question. I wonder where you got it from. Writer's block, I thankfully did not suffer too much from writer's block. If I did have to overcome, mostly because there wasn't, so back then before the pandemic happened, I had to drive to work, and there's a lot of traffic going to work. Usually probably take me like an hour to get to work. So I spent a lot of time either listening to audiobooks or listening to music. And honestly, music in the car is the easiest way for me to create scenes in my head. I'm like always like seeing different like moments or captions or stuff like that. So I would usually think of these scenes and then probably put it on my notes app or write it whenever I got to work or something like that. So if I ever did kind of run out of inspiration or out of ideas, I'd probably just go driving around like listening to music, because then like those scenes would literally just like come to me pretty easily.
What's your go-to driving around for inspiration music?
There's a lot of different ones. Funny enough,
There's a dance if you go and watch his 100 subscriber video.
the highlights one.
Yeah.
the first one didn't work out. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a lot of different ones. It's usually anything that, because it's all emotional. It really depends. If you guys haven't already, my website, which I don't pump too often because I don't work on it too much, but my website actually has a music page, and it has a bunch of songs and scenes that I thought about when I like listened to them, and they're all vastly different. There's like really soft sounds. There's like more like pop punk kind of stuff. So yeah, actually on my website there's music that inspired my book, and it has like Amber and Vin's like soft moments, and it has like a song for that, or like the final fight, and it has a song for that. So it's literally just a lot of, it depends on the song. We'll find like a different moment in the book for me to write about.
I was wholly unaware that was a thing, and I am certainly going to look at that after this interview, because I didn't realize you were going to have like a pre-prepared website to answer my questions. So
I seriously, I never thought about it. I don't go on it. It's actually really easy to find. Get this. It's Wait, is it that? Hang on. I was about to like be really funny, but be really cool, but I messed up.
I agree.
Yeah, Reading with Lawrence is. I was gonna say you should do a Spotify playlist.
I've never actually thought about that. I probably could. I have like a writing playlist where those songs are on it, plus a couple of other ones.
I feel like a lot of my music would not be conducive to writing.
Yeah, right.
So like, it depends on the scene, so it could be.
Nico, do you have any further inquiries you would like to make of Mr. Walker here?
I think I have about asked. We did mine completely out of order because it just kind of went with a natural kind of flow. But I think through the answers, there's been some that kind of got answered. Like you had a question too, where just from discussion. So I think I've about asked. I don't know if we had any more viewer questions. I tried to look at the chat a little bit.
Yeah, I'm really dumb. I forgot. My website's called WalkerWrites7 YT. I was thinking it was just my YouTube name.com.
Oh,
Definitely
okay, so
check it
you
out.
forgot the name of your website.
Yeah.
We're plugging that too now, guys. Everyone go to WalkerWrites7 YT.
Yeah, we got to get that traffic up. Deal with the Google algorithm.
Today's video is sponsored by the letter W.
So, that said, let's do kind of a mild spoiler section. I don't really want to get into details of these scenes, but I kind of want to talk about them in a sort of vague manner, if that makes any sort of sense. You know what I mean?
I honestly don't, but I'm curious to see how this is going to go.
All right. So what I'm mainly talking about is like one of my favorite scenes was the retirement home and how the characters work together and the emotion and the just absolute. It felt like a little bit of a gut punch and an elation at the same time to see how the grandfather reacted to.
Bye, Epic. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy it when you read it.
See, Epic, how they reacted to those.
You know, oddly, like I started reading that scene, and at first I'm like, this feels weird. Like I wasn't expecting this scene, but I did really enjoy the scene as well. Kind of the way it all came together, and like I was absolutely picturing a retirement home, reading it as well, and the kind of the finale to that scene. It went from I'm like, this seems kind of out of place to like, oh my gosh, no, this fits perfectly, and I completely see where it's going. So that would not be a scene that I would have expected to say, like, I really enjoyed this scene, but I did end up really liking it.
Yeah, it ended up being one of my favorites of the book. Even though we never really go back to that character, at least in this book, getting those emotions off the page felt really, really good. Like it was almost like feeling hope. You know what I mean? When you're reading a book, even though there's nothing that really translates perfectly. I don't know if I'm being succinct here. But I really, really enjoyed that scene, and I can't wait for other people to read it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was a really challenging one to write for multiple reasons. I think the first off is the cringe factor. Like how well can you write people dancing basically in public and have this emotional moment that isn't too overdone. I think I had to work really hard to rewrite that whole kind of setup a lot. It's like, but honestly, yeah, I really loved writing it. I liked adding in the humor, like when they first get there, kind of setting the scene toward like kind of being like a little down. I think there's a lot we can probably go into, a lot. I think I don't know. I'm so ignorant. I don't even know the right word for it, but like generational people, so like older people, I feel like there's a lot that we can go into. I know it's a subject that America probably needs to look at more. How we treat our old people, not foster homes, like old folks home and stuff like that. So I definitely wanted to touch on that a bit, but I also loved, again, it's one of the first times you really see them interacting, like all three of them. So I knew I wanted to have a lot of like witty dialogue there, and then his whole thing, like what they're kind of dealing with, is essentially a direct allusion to Alzheimer's. If that wasn't clear, I feel like I almost didn't want to make it too obvious, but it definitely was a direct connection to Alzheimer's. It's the idea of basically you losing a part of yourself as you get older and you can't really stop it. And it's really tragic. So I tried to, again, that's actually a theme I like to put a lot in my book, is things that are real, but not me just like writing. I wanted to write it sort of like in a fantastical way. So there's some stuff where it is basically supposed to be based off of this very real struggle that people have, like so with mental health or like Alzheimer's and stuff like that. But I kind of change it to where it does fit into this more like magical sort of like setting. So I think maybe that's why at least the emotion worked for me, is because whenever they sort of like give him this connection, I feel like you can see a lot of those videos where they talk about like grandma or grandpa remember blah 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 for the first time and stuff like that. It's I think it kind of works because those are real emotions, you losing yourself, losing a part of yourself, and then being brought back to that and feeling like your old self again, or remembering something that makes you feel young, or like your old self is just really powerful. So it wasn't really that hard to write since it is very real.
Yeah, there's definitely there were some things like that that I did pick up on that like, oh, I see what he's going for here. And then even just doing the interview, you mentioned some other things that I didn't take in the same way. And I think there's always with books there's so much room for interpretation, but kind of all of the little like real moments like that, I feel like there's lots of different people who could then see themselves in a specific scene or identify with a different character. So I thought that was really interestingly done. One of my favorites, which it wasn't even, it didn't even matter that much with it, but when Amber and Matt were first kind of like training and like she kept like knocking him down and stuff, and like the banner like really started going, that was just such a fun scene. And then kind of like a lot with the camping scene too, was something I like too. Even though I still maintain they're out there just like messing with nature and like damming a river and stuff. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? You're supposed to be one with nature. The scene was really, really good. And it won me over anyway. And like them talking around the fire and everything. So there were, those were some of the parts like that really, really stood out besides the retirement home one, which I was also going to mention. That was another one that I enjoyed.
I think that's interesting because, like, honestly, I think it really depends on your perspective. At least, like, while I was writing it, the whole point kind of is to sort of like bond and like connect with nature, and it's like so they sort of, and also they didn't really damn it. They sort of like moved it, and they sort of like worked with it. I definitely see where you talked about how you just kind of like punched a hole through some like branches at the top. I'm like, I guess I could see that. I don't know how much you'd feel about losing some branches and leaves, and it was for them to admire the nature sky. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, I honestly didn't think about that. Like I had full intention of them sort of like working with it, and like kind of like around it, like kind of being like one with it, and sort of like again like cooperating. So I thought it was interesting. You came away from that. I'm like, oh, that's a different take on it. That's
so
not
what
wrong.
I was say is they knocked off the branches, but then they worked together to regrow them.
They probably did too, because Amber's like, no, we got to like put nature back and, you know, not change anything. But that was just, I was reading that, and that one part, I'm like, guys, what are you doing? Come on.
Well, Walker, what are your favorites?
My favorite scene,
figured we'd do one for each of us.
I feel like that's probably a harder question for him.
I know.
There's just so many. I think. Okay, this is really hard, actually. I don't know. There's a couple. I think I just really like. I feel like I have a really happy scene and a really sad scene, or a really emotional one. So I'm gonna go with both just to cheat. But I feel like the really emotional scenes, when you figure out, when you get to the part where, because throughout the book you have those interludes, which is essentially us catching up with Magdalena, and you can sort of see the hints of like where it's going. So you start to see there's like brief mentions of, you know, Matt seeing something on Magdalena that doesn't seem important at the time, and then it's brought up again later, and then when you finally figure out like why she has this thing, and it's because of this like terminal attachment. I just think Magdalena's and what happened between her and one of the other characters, Alexei, and when you finally just, and it's not really a scene, but I guess kind of it's just a build up to it. When you finally get to that part where she has to revert back to how she was because she lost what she had gained. I know it's pretty quick. I didn't like elaborate on too much, but that build up when you finally get to that scene is really powerful for me. I think it's really tragic in my opinion, for so many more reasons, because, you know, Tanya's a part of it. I know we're trying to keep this vague, so yeah, it's just the idea of like how she was so close to being strong or seeing herself differently, and then the way that she's kind of betrayed but unknowingly betrayed. And yeah, I think I just really liked like that whole part. That was really emotional. And the positive scene would probably be, I really like the movie. And this is funny because I ended up adding this later, but I really like the movie date scene. What one?
Oh, I forgot about the movie date.
Yeah, the movie date scene I actually really liked because I thought it felt really natural. Because mostly a lot of people kept like telling me my beta reads, they were just like, I feel like we didn't see them go on a date or anything, or they weren't really connecting. I'm like, fine, I'll throw in something to where it sounds like they're connecting or spending time outside of like hanging out with Matt. And so I ended up developing that whole chapter later, and I ended up just really liking it. I liked it because I was able to set. There's so many reasons. I liked how I was able to set up Juliet and her, because you see her as kind of like a little punk for most of the story. I feel like that scene is the first time you see Juliet's heart and how much she actually really cares for Vin. We also see Juliet bonding with Amber, and you kind of get that scene where she's gonna like spray, or she's gonna retaliate on Vin and like spray her with soda or whatever, but she realizes that Amber is a water weaver, so she can't retaliate on Vin because Amber can stop her. So you kind of get this like subtle hint that Amber and Vin have each other's back and they work well together. You also get a resolution to Vin's father being really stressed out, not sleeping and stuff like that. As you hear, he's like really stressed out with work at the beginning of the book, and you get his subtle resolution there. And again, you just kind of see like Vin. I also want to make sure that was a really strong thing is couples, so like girlfriends or significant others, them bonding and having good relationships with their family. I wanted to make sure that that was really seen how easily and cohesively Amber can fit in with Vin's family. So I guess that's not a scene, that's a whole freaking chapter, and I'm like rambling. But yeah, that whole chapter, I was able to fit so much stuff into it that like I'm really glad I ended up like putting it in.
I tell you, the parts of the movie scene made me cringe so hard, not because it was bad, but because it was so freaking real. Like the parents dancing part, I'm like, oh God, I can just like
I
feel
can
the
picture
embarrassment
that.
for these characters. I just like it was cringeworthy, but in like a good way. Because I know that sounds like I'm saying something negative, but it just like the like secondhand embarrassment was so very much there. And so yeah, and I still like, I don't know, your beta readers probably have had different tastes than me, but like I really liked that we didn't focus like too much on like trying to force in a romance. It's like the relationship felt very natural, and like you could tell, like, you know, you kind of already think of them, and I think in a lot of ways they already kind of thought of themselves as a couple, even though they just hadn't really advanced to that stage yet. But it's like I enjoyed it being written that way. So
Thank you.
I did as well. It felt a lot more again. Usually, if there is going to be a romance, it's not waited until it's either in the second book, so they've waited super long, to the point where you're frustrated because you know it's going to happen. Just go ahead and resolve it and move on, or it happens way too fast. And so there was this nice organic growth to where I think we were around like 70 or 80% before we even get a minor, like we get confirmation.
The first kiss, you mean?
Oh,
I think he was just trying to be vague, but yeah.
No.
Well, we already said that they're in a relationship. I think it's okay. But well, I think it's funny.
We are
I'm talking like the camping scene was like 60-70%. And that's like, you know, they have the whole conversation where did he just give us permission and things of that nature, where the confirmation.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and Nico, he was like messaging me. He was just like, they're not kissing yet. Why aren't they kissing yet? And I was like, oh, just you wait. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, it was definitely a very slow burn.
But it wasn't too slow. Like I read like Alona Andrews, her series. It's always just the like, you know, it's going to happen, but they always make you wait till book 2. And I don't
want people to wait that long. I think what I really wanted to get across first before romance is truly a partnership. I feel like that, especially just in kind of my experience with what I had to deal with trying to find my partner and who I have, is I think the word partner means a lot more to me than like love or anything like that. I feel like finding someone who has your back and you work with really well and that you understand each other and have similar like ideology, even though you may not be the same person, but I just think partnership is a lot more important to me than like love or anything like that. So I wanted to make sure that that came across first before we really go into any confirmation about them being romantically involved.
Okay. Well, this actually is a very good segue to kind of start wrapping things up. Because I have a question of what message do you hope your readers take away after reading Weavers?
Oh.
Because you address a lot of social issues within the book.
I do, don't I?
You do.
My main message is definitely, I think people to, because it's kind of subtle and definitely comes in more towards the end, and you'll see a lot more of it in sequels. But this whole story is supposed to be about the connections you have between people, and so I kind of just hope like that's what you kind of take away from this is to, I know you don't have magical powers, but to take the time to really try to bond and understand someone and like kind of like what their struggles are. That's probably like that's my message right there, is to bond and try to connect with people on some level.
All right,
It's a
Nico,
good
do you have
message.
any? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I think I've run dry, so it's just I keep like I've just been kind of asking as we talk more because it's been a really interesting conversation. But yeah, I think that does in a lot of ways kind of sum things up really nicely because just with the characters and their connections being so important, it's a nice message.
Well, we've had a title reveal and we've had a cover reveal. Can we get a soft release date for book 2?
It's a very, very soft release date. Honestly, it's probably your guys' fault it's taking longer. Everyone,
How dare you blame this on me?
I'm
I
blaming
need
it
that
on
book
all of
now.
you. I'm spending so much more time reading than writing, and I'm having a good time. But yeah, reading is slowing down, or writing's slowing down. I was hoping for yearly releases, and I want to release at the end of August. Oh, thank you.
I'm like, are they talking about us or the characters or?
I doubt they've read my book, so I'm assuming us. But thank you either way. Flattered. I'm hoping for August, end of August. I'm already have written it. Or not, yeah, I've already written a lot of it, and so it's definitely in the works.
All right. Well, if you need somebody to harass you,
more than you already do,
are more than willing to volunteer for that thankless job.
I'm sure
I
you
love
guys
them more than you already do.
I'm sure you guys will have to be beta readers because that's one thing I don't know how to do, because obviously beta reading a first book is really easy to find beta readers for. I don't know how beta readers going to go for sequels, because no one's read the first one. How can you properly beta read the sequel? So
maybe we should send a copy to Dom.
Yeah, I can't remember if I talked to Dom about this already.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, he's in training to be a proofreader. So.
Oh, that's right. Okay, I was like, sure, I guess. I mean, that makes sense now. I forgot about that. Or just like, of all the names you pull out of your hat, I'm like, yeah, they're all great. I don't know why specifically Dom, but sure. Yeah, I forgot about that. He is doing that. I remember now. I think I talked over on Megan's channel about him like proofreading and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I need that big time. No comments on that. You guys know how much I need it. No comments.
Well, all right. Is anybody who's still watching have any questions for us before we wrap this up?
Does anybody want to see the cover reveal and
yeah, we can do the cover and title again for book 2.
Yeah, I don't know how many people were here when we shared it earlier. I feel like people
sure, go ahead and throw it back up, and I'll put it back on screen.
We probably should have waited, but as soon as it was brought up, I'm like, I want to see it now too, because I know, right?
I hinted at it. I was just like, do we want to wait? And Andrew's like, no.
I get it. So I think it makes sense.
All right, I'm gonna pull up the first one too.
I'll take it.
Well, it's official. You win.
I'm the winner.
Aw. He is the cutest, isn't he? Look at him.
What can I say? I'm wearing my age well.
A lot. You're not very humble, so.
No.
Oh man.
Go ahead and pull that up, and we'll throw it on screen.
I'm working on it. You know how many art files I have?
No, actually, would you like to tell me?
Well, actually, okay. Well, actually, yeah. Sure. Let me share this real quick. Hang on.
I always feel like going back. What was that old cartoon? Under Reba.
Okay. So this is. Why don't you share it?
You want me to share that?
Yeah. So this is just like all the different like iterations of me trying to get that first cover. So it's like all like the sketches
Oh
that
wow.
he sent me,
Okay.
and then me trying to actually get the cover in the right place and everything like that. We have like
Interesting.
Weaver's cover attempt 1 and cover attempt in a different file. So
That is a lot of iterations.
yeah.
But it came out great.
No, wait, no, this isn't the right one. This doesn't have the cover on it. No.
I'll go ahead and pull that. Do you want me to add that back to stream or?
Yeah, you can add it back. It's fine.
Okay. I don't want any jump scares. You hear me? If I get a jump scare, I'm leaving. I'm into the stream and I'm gonna go cry.
No jump scares. Okay, so anyway, so this is the first one in case anyone hasn't seen like up close.
Yes, I did. Jeremy has the answer. It is Speedy Gonzalez from Looney Tunes. Faster. This is when I start berating the person that I'm interviewing. There we go.
Yes, this is them side by side.
I really
We
do
have
like
Weavers
that cover.
and War Weavers. I like that cover art.
I like the orange and like the swirl. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
the
love-
orange is working well for me. But it's also got like a little bit of a peach down at the bottom with maybe a hint of pink. That works and fades really well. And then you've got the white moving through. And then you've got this random lightning bolt up here that I really, really enjoy, which is a bit of, well, no, I guess if you see the cover of Weavers, it's not that big of a spoiler.
Well, you figured out like the prologue of book 1.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So remember, guys,
All right, guys.
War Weavers are our cover reveal and title reveal for the upcoming second book.
Yes.
I
You heard
think
it first
that we have had a good time. I know I did. I had a great time talking to all of y'all. But at this point, we didn't get any questions from the chat. So this seems like a great time to wrap it up. Do you have any final thoughts, or are we good to go?
I just want to thank everyone for their time and interest. So thank you guys so much.
Yes,
thank you guys for
everybody thanks to everybody who showed up. So that's it, guys.
Oh my God.
I'm going to sign off and say, stay magical. Peace out.
See you guys.
Bye.
Have a good one.